Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's get started with Week 65's Word Nerd Wednesday. Now, typically, as you've noted before, I try to take a look at a word or two, or 7, from the other episodes of the week, words that could use a good deep dive. But this time around, I realized we've never done a Word Nerd Wednesday on the name of this place that we love so much, Middle-earth. Now, as Tolkien fans, we use this word practically every day, so it would be good to spend some time understanding it. Now, in the PPP, we've indirectly talked about part of the etymology of Middle-earth in episode 197 on Treebeard, and we glanced by it in episode 141 in Mini Meetings. And of course, one bit of Old English poetry that I'm going to go back to tonight is something that Sean and I have talked about since our first episode nearly 9 years ago. But we've never delved into the etymology aside from tracing the term Middle-earth to that poem, so let's get into it. We'll start with letter number 183. It's really just a set of notes that Tolkien wrote in 1956 in response to his friend W.H. Auden's review of The Return of the King in the New York Times. Near the beginning, Tolkien explains something that we've talked about before, that Middle-earth is meant to be our Earth in a forgotten time, and that the name he uses is not his own invention. He says, Middle-earth is not an imaginary world. The name is the modern form, appearing in the 13th century and still in use, of Midden-Erde, Middle-Erde, an ancient name for the Ecumeni, the abiding place of men, the objectively real world, in use specifically opposed to imaginary worlds as fairyland, or unseen worlds as heaven or hell. End quote. Now, a couple of years later, in letter 211 that we've looked at over the last 2 Tolkien Tuesdays, Tolkien uses almost those same words to explain it again, saying, Middle-earth is, by the way, and if such a note is necessary, not my own invention. It is a modernization or alteration of an old word for the inhabited world of men, the Ecumeni. Middle because thought of vaguely as set amidst the encircling seas, and in the northern imagination, between ice of the north and the fire of the south. Old English Midden-Yard, medieval English Midden-Erde, Middle-Erde. Many reviewers seem to assume that Middle-earth is another planet. End quote. Now, that Greek word I've been trying to pronounce, I have also heard it oikumene, so I have no clue, is a Greek word meaning inhabited. Now, back in the day, Sean explained to me that it was used in classical texts to refer to the entirety of the inhabited world. It's the origin of the Christian term ecumenical, referring to concepts and discussions that are meant to be universal, involving all people of the Christian world. Now, it's also related to the prefix eco, as in ecology or economy. Both terms have their origins in this Greek word that means dwelling or house. It's also distantly related to the Old English root wick, meaning dwelling or village, that shows up in place names like Warwickshire and Sandwich. But I digress. Now, getting back to Middle-earth. If you've listened to this show for a while, or to the PPP especially, you'll recognize that the Old English term Tolkien used in letter 211, Midden-Yard, has come up before. It's referenced in those famous 2 lines of Cynewulf's Christ poem, which sparked the invention of the Middle-earth legendarium and Sean's favorite character in it. Eale rendel engle beortast over Midden-Yard monum sended. Now, I'm sure I did not do that justice compared to my good friend Sean Marchese. But regardless of my pronunciations, the OED tells us that Midden-Yard, meaning basically what Tolkien said in that letter, the middle region between heaven and hell and its inhabitants, in Old English is very old. In fact, they say it's inherited from Germanic, which means it's older than the English language itself. And it appears in many of our favorite ancient English texts. It's in Caedmon's hymn, it's in Beowulf, and hat tip to Sean here because I don't do Middle English much. If we follow the word through its changes into Middle English, it's even in Lacheman's Brut. Now, Midden-Yard doesn't mean exactly Middle-earth, but something more like middle yard or middle enclosure. According to the Ring of Words, the compound has a long history and prehistory. It is a Germanic formation found in the oldest Germanic language, Gothic, recorded in the 4th century in the form Middengards, the first element being related to English mid, and the second element ultimately the same word as yard. And this is worth pointing out because that second part, yard, is not the word for earth. It meant an enclosed area, like a yard or a garden, both of which come from it, but also could mean an enclosed world in Old English and other Germanic languages. Norse mythology and Marvel Comics MCU fans will recognize that guard from Asgard, as well as the common name for Earth in those stories, Midgard. Midgard. So Midgard didn't evolve directly into Middle Earth. If it had stayed in English, it seems like it would have turned into a word like middle yard. Now, thankfully, it didn't do that. It seems to have disappeared around 1300. Now, going back to Ring of Words, we're told that by the 12th century, its form had changed, with the loss of the G, pronounced as Y, to Midden-Erd. The first part of the compound having now become unfamiliar, it was remodeled as Middle-Erd, the second element of which was understood as the word Erd, meaning region. That form Middle-Erd first appears in 1175, and it shows up in one of our favorite Middle English pieces. Okay, it's probably the only Middle English piece I know. It's also one of Tolkien's favorites, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. But that form also seems to disappear from use after a few hundred years, replaced around 1300 by the very familiar word earth, giving us the compound Middle-Earth. And in that form, it appears in Shakespeare's works around 1600, the writings of Sir Walter Scott and Nathaniel Hawthorne in the 1800s, and then cited in both 1937 and 1954 in the OED in the works of J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, interestingly, that 1954 entry, not surprisingly, was the Fellowship of the Ring. I thought that the 1937 entry must have been a reference to The Hobbit, except Tolkien never used Middle-Earth in The Hobbit. No, the work the OED cites Tolkien using it in 1937 is actually Ambarkanta, which you can find in The Shaping of Middle-Earth, History of Middle-Earth, Volume 4. Now, prior to Tolkien, it was just commonly Middle-Earth, all lowercase. It was Tolkien who popularized the convention we still follow, at least when talking about his writings, capital M hyphen lowercase e. And that is the only correct capitalization to use, folks. And that's it for today's Word Nerd Wednesday. Come back in Series 9 as we wander the wide, wild, wonderful world of words weekly on Wednesdays. And if there's a word you want to know more about, just let me know. Email barnleman@theprancingponypodcast.com. And as I'll do each day this week, I'm going to remind you once more about the upcoming schedule for the TTT over the next 5 weeks. This is the last week of the current 8-week series. The show will go into hiatus from December 2nd to 14th. Then I return the week of December 16th to the 21st with a special holiday week of episodes on Letters from Father Christmas. And after that, I'll take my actual time off for the weeks of Christmas and New Year's, starting Series 9 on January 6th. Now, please visit patreon.com/TolkienTimes to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, a monthly hangout with me, bonus weekly episode, and a lot more. And then join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times for Third Age Thursday. If you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe. Please follow or subscribe in your podcast apps and look for the opportunities to give me a review wherever you find that. And please follow @Tolkien Times on all your social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.